Hello. The Divine Code reading for February 17th, pages 509 and 510. We're continuing in the subchapter, Partners with Whom There Can Be No Status of Marriage. Topic number 16. It is explained in topic 414 below that God's explicit command in the Torah. There can be no status of actual marriage between Jews and Gentiles. The true identity of a child as a Jew or a Gentile by birth is matrilineal. It follows the identity of the mother who conceived the embryo and carried it through pregnancy until the child's birth. This is stated explicitly by God in the Torah. See Rashi on Deuteronomy 7:4. On the other hand, the membership of the Jewish-born people is one of the 12 tribes of Israel is patrilineal, based on the tribe of the Jewish-born father. Therefore, a child who is born to a Jewish woman and a Gentile father is fully Jewish, but without membership in any of the 12 tribes. See Rashi on Leviticus 24:10. Also, Shavut Yaakov, Volume 1, Chapter 20, which does not find any aspect of marital status between a Jew and a Gentile, and only refers to the monetary aspect, such as marriage, in the context of the country's secular laws. Therefore, this would be a case where, in order for the marriage to be considered a marriage, it would have to be acceptable according to Torah law and also acceptable according to secular law. And in this case, even if it's acceptable by secular law, it is not acceptable by Torah law, and therefore it would not meet the standards of being a marriage. Therefore, a Gentile man who became married to a Jewess, and married is in parentheses, or a Gentile woman who had civil marriage with a Jew, is not considered married according to the Torah law for Gentiles or Jews. Another man who cohabits with a Jewish or Gentile wife that is involved in such an intermarriage is not liable for the sin of adultery, and he would be liable for a baalot baal, and neither is the woman liable for adultery. So he's not liable. The baal would be a full wife. See Minhag Chinuch, Commandment 35, Section 21. We're now beginning Chapter 4, Precepts related to marriage, fornication, and divorce. Even though Gentiles are not commanded to be fruitful and multiply, this is explained in Tractate Sanhedrin 59a that Adam was commanded to be fruitful and multiply, but at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, this commandment was removed from Gentiles, and it remained only for Jews. Likewise, this commandment this applies to any pre-Sinai commandment that was recorded by Moses in the book of Genesis or the book of Exodus up into the account of the covenant and the revelation of Mount Sinai, but which was not repeated to Moses at Mount Sinai. But the 7 commandments and the extended Noahide code were commanded to Moses at Mount Sinai as a Torah law for Gentiles. See the author's introduction in this volume. Therefore, beginning from the giving of the Torah, beginning of the Torah laws to Moses on Mount Sinai, the original commandments from before Sinai are only binding on Jews and not on Gentiles. This is also the opinion of Tosafot on Tractate Yevamot 62a. So there was a commandment given to Adam to be fruitful and multiply. This commandment existed until Sinai for all people. However, it was not repeated for the non-Jewish people at Mount Sinai. Only the 7 commandments were repeated at Mount Sinai as applying to Gentiles. Therefore, the other commandments that people had prior to Sinai would not apply after Sinai to the nations. It would only apply if it's given to the Jewish people. It would apply to the Jewish people if it was given to them, but they were not given to the non-Jewish people at Sinai. Nevertheless, this only means that Gentiles have no explicit commandment about this, but as a logical necessity for the establishment of society, they are obligated to do so. As explained in Part 1, Fundamentals of the Faith, Chapter 3, Topics 8 to 10, there are logical obligations for Gentiles, and since marriage is a way of accomplishing the settling of the world and is God's will, it is obvious that they are obligated in general to involve themselves in this task. This would fit with the opinions that Gentiles are obligated by the verse in Isaiah 45:18 to make the world settled. Yeshuv Ha'olam in Hebrew. See footnote 126. That'll be in tomorrow's reading. It is possible that this is due to the logical obligation commanded in it. The practical difference is that if Gentiles were expressly commanded to procreate, they would be obligated to do so, even if it would cause them discomfort or trouble. But since the obligation stems only from a logical reason, they are only obligated to do so if there is no logical reason not to do so. An individual Gentile is thus exempt if he would experience any serious discomfort as a result of fulfilling it. So this is a logical obligation upon society, not necessarily upon individuals. In Jewish law, it's an obligation for each male to procreate. But each male Gentile does not have the same obligation. It's just upon society. So there could be some people that are having large families and other people are not having families, and that would be fine as long as there's sufficient there to continue society. This is written in the responsa of Khatam Sofer Eben Azer, chapter 20, that since only Jewish men are obligated in the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, therefore a Jewish woman is not obligated to endure pain in order to fulfill this, but she may do so by her own choice. The same logic applies to Gentiles. It is nevertheless God's will that every man who is able should marry a woman and have children with her. As he said to Adam and Chava, that is Eve, in Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and multiply. Likewise, God told Noah after the flood in Genesis 9:7, and you be fruitful and multiply, teem on the earth and multiply on it. Aruk Sholem Shulchan on Eben Hazer, chapter 1, section 5. See Tractate Yevamot 62b and Rashi on Genesis 9:7, which was said to Noah that anyone who abstains from procreating is compared to one who murdered, since the verse in Genesis 9:6 regarding the prohibition of murder is juxtaposed with verse 9:7 regarding procreation. This implies that there is a divine punishment for a Gentile man or woman who deliberately does not fulfill the obligation to procreate, even if the person has a valid reason. As explained in Part 1, footnote 77, even though Gentiles are not obligated to give charity, according to Rambam, nevertheless, Sodom was destroyed because they nullified all acts of kindness and charity from their midst. This means that a society can receive punishment if there is widespread behavior that opposes morality, even if it does not go against an express divine command. And it appears that the same applies to the issue of procreation. So it's upon society. These actions are on society. They're not on the individual. And just as in Sodom was destroyed because they outlawed charity. That was the reason why Sodom was destroyed. And therefore, it wasn't just one or two people that was not giving it, that would be overlooked. But instead, the entire society decided that they were not going to give charity. Likewise, if an entire society decided they're not going to have children, that would be considered a sin. But it's not on each individual. If there's sufficient people within society, and society is encouraging the families, such as in America, we have tax credits for having children, then society is benefiting, and society is fulfilling its obligations. But just as we are members of society, therefore there is we share in that communal requirement that the community has to be giving charity, the community has to be fruitful and multiply, and therefore each member has a share in that. It has a connection to it. Thank you.